In order to start an editing session here, I've got my screen, and on the left-hand side in the table of contents, I've got my layers, my points, my lines, and my polygons, and my ortho image. So now there are a couple of things that we need to do in order to get started, and the first is we need to add our editor toolbar. So I'm going to right-click in this gray space at the top and click on editor, and that will open my editor toolbar. And I'm just going to dock it anywhere in that space. We can see it's all grayed out, and that's because we haven't started an edit session yet. I, at this same time, like to right-click and choose Advanced Editing. This is another toolbar. I'm not going to get into this one right now, but I would encourage you in your own time to go through and experiment with some of these tools. They can do a lot of really interesting things for editing if you create a lot of data. So if you click on the editor toolbar, in the drop-down you can see it says Start Editing. And this is one way to start an edit session. When you click on Start Editing, what you'll see is this window pops up and it will show you all of the feature classes and all of the elements that you have available to you to edit. Now, under the bottom here, at the bottom where it says Source, I can see I have two locations here. One is the SDE, which is SDW, all of York Region data, and the other is General. And this is where I've been keeping all my data. And you'll notice in this box at the top, if I switch between them, the pencil on the database symbols up here will change to show me which ones I'll have access to. So I want access to the points, lines, and polygons. So I'm going to click that and press OK. And now I can see on the right-hand side, I've got my Create Features window that popped up. This may not necessarily pop up in the editor toolbar. Click Create Features, and that will open this tab on the right-hand side. The other way you can start an edit session, if you right-click on your layer and choose Edit Features, you can start an edit session this way as well. It's grayed out now because we are already in an edit session. We've already started one. But that's a really good way of specifying what layer it is that you want to edit. I'm just going to zoom in one of my sections of the map here where I can see a few buildings. And the first thing I'm going to do is edit my points. So in my Create Features on the right-hand side, I'm going to click on Point Editing. And now when I move my cursor into the map, I can see I've got a point at the end of my cursor. And I'm just going to click in the center of wherever I want to point, and a highlighted location will appear after that, and that will show me where I've just put my point. If I make a mistake, I can press Control Z and it will disappear. So you can undo this feature. Now, one other thing I can do is, up at the top, if I open my attributes, I can see that it's offering me the point that's selected and also the fields. So this actually is, these are the attributes that you'll find in the attribute table. And if I put in a status of current and today's date, and I go back into my attribute table, you'll see that that's actually reflected in here. So what you're doing is populating the attributes at the same time. This is a really efficient way to do it. So I'm just going to continue putting in some of my points. And let's just say for this one here, I put the point right here, but I make a mistake. If that's not where you want it to go, and you don't want to delete it, but you just want to move it, you can click on this Edit tool. And when you hover over your point, you'll see you get a crosshair, and you can click on it and move it wherever you want to move it. So this is a really good way to edit your data without having to delete it. And then I can go in and I can add my data. So with points, it's pretty straightforward. That's all there is to points. If you wanted to make sure that you were putting your point in a particular location related to another feature, you can right-click in your gray space and choose your snapping toolbar. This will become more useful for us in the next couple of exercises that we do, but what you can see here is that we have snapping to other points, snapping to the end of a feature, so that would be if you drew a line and you clicked 8 times, the first and the last place that you click will be snapped to. Vertex snapping, which means anywhere someone has clicked to create a feature, and edge snapping, which means anywhere along a side or an edge. And under the snapping drop-down menu, you have additional options for yourself, including if you go into the options menu here, which I'm not really going to get too much into, you can choose how close something needs to be and how you want it to snap. For us, I'm just going to turn off the snapping right now, and I'll turn it on as I need it. So I'm all finished now with my points, but now I need to put some line features in. So I'm going to go back to my Create Features window, which is here at the bottom. And now I can click on Line Editing, and I can edit my lines. So what I want to do here is I'm going to edit my lines wherever I see a little roadway in here. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about these tools is that we have, for things like curves and arcs, I could do this, where I click on each location, but it's not as smooth as I would like it to be. So if I undo those and click on, up here in the editor toolbar, I have some choices. Endpoint arc segment is my preferred arc of choice, because if you choose the end of where you want it to go, you can move your mouse to decide how you want the curve to be situated. And when you're finished with your curve, you can go back to straight segment for snapping at the top, and you can take this right to the end. To finish your sketch, you can either click twice, so do a double click, or you can press F2. Once I've done that, if I wanted to digitize a line feature around this building where the parking lot is, I want to make sure it's connected right to this other line. And in order to do that, I need to turn my edge snapping on. So now when I move my mouse close to the line, you can see that my cursor, even though it's hard for you to see right there, but I'm actually moving my mouse, it's not right on top of the line, it's snapping to it, which means that when I click, it's actually going to connect directly to it. And this is really important if you're doing things like building networks, or you need to make sure one road connects to another. The same is true for things like water features. If you have rivers and streams, you want to make sure that a stream flowing from one to another is actually connected. So I'm just going to finish this off here and press F2 to finish that line. If I want each of these in a separate linear feature, a separate segment, I can actually break these. So we have a tool up in the toolbar called the Split tool. And if you click on it, and in this case I'm going to change my snapping to vertex snapping, but also keep my edge snapping on, then I can snap right to a corner. And now you can see I've broken that into 2 separate features. And when I go into my attributes, I can go in and populate these as well. I can actually choose a date, and it's going to format it for me. So now I can see here that my line is not exactly the shape I want it to be. Instead of deleting this and going in to try and recreate it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a tool called Reshape. So Reshape works, you can snap to the corners, and when I snap to this edge and double click or press F2, it reshapes the feature for me. It can be a little bit finicky, So you might just have to take a couple tries at it, but if you do that and make a mistake, you can press Control Z to undo it. Or you can go up to your toolbar at the top and click Undo or Redo. Those are the main tools. We also have Edit Vertices, where it will show you everywhere you've clicked. So if I wanted to add another one, if I right-click right on top of the line, I can insert a vertex, and now I can adjust my line even more. So there are a lot of options here for ways that you can edit your features. Now, one thing I want to emphasize is you never know when something's going to go wrong with your computer. So under the editor toolbar, you want to make sure that you save your edits frequently. So now everything I've done is recorded now. So now we're going to go on to our polygon features. And I think this is an extremely important one. Now, one thing that we can do is, if I know that I'm going to be creating, let's say, for example, buildings and also parking lots, then I can go into my layer properties and go into categories, and under status, I can add some values. So I can put here building, and I can also put parking. And when I press OK, it's going to add these to my table of contents. And that's good because it's going to help us to digitize and create what we want in an easier way. But when I go back to my Create Features panel, my window, I can see I don't see those symbols. And the reason why is because we've changed the symbols after we started an editing session, and so we have to go in and make some more changes to the template. So up here at the top, we have arranging templates and organizing templates, and these are actually for how you're editing. So if you click Organize Templates and choose Polygon Editing, we can create a new template. So we click New Template, and then Next. It's going to show us what we're going to see. We click Finish, and now at the side, that's what we have. We can see now we can remove this polygon editing one. Now, not only can we create polygons, but we can create polygons in predetermined symbols. So I don't have to separate these. It will also populate the attributes. So if I chose building, and at the bottom here I have some construction tools, these are options you have for creating features. So if I wanted to create a rectangle, I can click on a rectangle, on a point I want to start and create one. One thing I want to show you is, if you notice how it's snapping to my vertex here, if you don't want that, you can either turn off your vertex snapping or just hold your space bar down temporarily. So you click on the first line that you want to be the part of the rectangle, and now you can see I can create a perfect rectangle. When I press F2, there's my rectangle, and when I go into my attributes, building is already populated because of the symbols I chose. And I can choose today's date, and that feature is done. We can't do that all the time. We'll use this building right here. There are a couple of ways that we can create features for this building. One is to create another rectangle. So I can click on one corner and add this one in here. But if I make it a little bit transparent, what I'll notice is it's not exact. It's not exactly where I want it to be. So I'm going to press Control Z to undo that edit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose polygon. But we know that buildings have right angles. So I'm going to choose one corner and then the other. And if I right-click, I can choose a deflection angle. So I can say that I want to make sure that this next line is deflected by 90 degrees. I can do it again if I want to do a rectangle, or I can right-click and choose Square and Finish. And that will make a rectangle, you can see here. Now I can see mine is off a little bit, so what I can do is I can rotate it. If I click the Rotate tool, I can rotate my polygon, and then choosing my Edit tool, I can move it to where I want it to be, and now I've got my new feature there. I want to create an adjacent polygon to this one, and this is where it becomes really important. So in the email that I sent, it talked a little bit about slivers and gaps, and those are the things that we really want to avoid because they're really, really hard to see with the human eye unless you zoom into a ridiculous scale, and so instead what we want to do is prevent those things from happening. So in order to do that, I make sure that I'm still selecting building, and under the drop-down menu in the editor toolbar, there's one of these called trace. And what you can do with trace is, now we have our edge snapping on, so with trace you can click on an existing geometric feature and trace to one end. When you get to the end, you can stop, and you'll see I've created a line. This one exactly follows the line that I just created. If I click back on my straight segment, I can continue. I choose a deflection of 0 because I want this line to continue. Deflection of 90. For every line I'm creating. Except for the lines that have angles that are different than 90. Now, if you know these angles, you can definitely put them in. And then I choose Square and Finish at the end. Now here's what I've got, and if I zoom in really close to where my two buildings come together, I can see I don't have any gaps. These lines are the same, which is great. That's exactly what I want. But I made a mistake, and what I've done is I've connected these two, and I actually want them to be separate buildings. So similar to the feature we had for the split tool, which is for a line, we have our cut polygon tools. And this will be able to cut these polygons for you and make sure they have adjacent lines or a shared line. So what we can do is, I always try to make sure, because again, this is one of those really useful but a little bit finicky tools. So I'm going to put my vertex snapping on. I'm going to make sure I click well outside of my polygon, and then I'm going to snap to the first place I want it to be cut, and then draw my line, making sure I finish well outside of the polygon. This will just make sure that you're cutting this in the right place. If you press F2, you can see now I've got two polygons here. So what it's done is, it's made sure that I now have a shared boundary, an exactly shared boundary. And the nice thing about these tools is, we can use them to modify anything as well. So we have our reshape tool here. I can check to make sure that all of my lines are perfectly the way I want them to be. So these tools are really useful in that way. Other tools that you can use are, I'm just going to go back to my line editing and zoom out just a little bit. If you need a line to be perpendicular or parallel to any other features, if I right-click on the feature and choose parallel, then I can see no matter where my mouse is, that line will be parallel to what I just chose. So I'll show you that again. Once you've started creating a feature, you right-click on a different existing feature, and you get a whole other list of options here. I can also choose perpendicular, so I know it will be 90 degrees to another related object, which can be really useful. So I'll just use this to create a parallel line, and I'll finish my sketch there. So I want to designate this as a particular area, and I can definitely do that if I want to. I can now also use this, if I wanted to create another polygon by tracing it. So you can trace almost anything you want. You just basically have to draw around it. So I use the line as my boundary. And the reason why this is good is, if I wanted to create parking around the perimeter of this building, I can do that by tracing. So now I've got my large parking area, which I know has a boundary that matches the one of the buildings. And now I'm going to save my edit.